Thank you very much for joining us for our survey lecture series. My name is Tyler Benson, and I am here to share with you a concept that was often talked about in the readings, but often passed over, maybe misunderstood. And that is the concept of ideals. When most people came to Mr. Casey asking for advice on their life in some direction and guidance on where they were headed, most of the time, Mr. Casey would talk about the person's ideal. And it's a unique concept that is found in many other spiritual traditions, but is emphasized in the readings that Mr. Casey gave to people that were seeking guidance. So I have a presentation that I would love to share with you about choosing your ideal and creating our own standard operating procedure for our life or a spiritual operating procedure. So, about me, I have been a young seeker my whole life. Well, I'm older now. But at the time, I was fascinated with spirituality and Jesus and started to explore my spiritual relationships and had a lot of pastors and teachers and mentors invest time in my spiritual growth. One of them introduced me to Mr. Casey when I was 16, and by the time I was 18, became truly fascinated in his work. I applied a lot of these suggestions to my own life, and I was deeply impacted by the results. This was my dad and myself. My dad is the one in the glasses. This was like my third or fifth birthday party, and just happened that I was a pretty awesome kid, very cheerful, very happy, and felt very close to that Christ spirit. But as I started to work with the uh, adolescence of life, uh, a lot of the spiritual traditions kept me grounded and allowed me to be centered and focused on the things that I wanted to be important in my life. And a majority of that came from the guidance found in the readings. So, what we will talk about today is what an ideal is, what the readings suggest, and we'll also talk about what your personal ideal is, big or small, and things to consider when choosing your own ideal, and then practical ways of creating and living our ideals and experiences to expect as we are. Ideals, from a Merriam-Webster definition, is the conception of something in its perfection or the epitome of perfection. And this can be seen as like a perfect circle. It can only exist in imagination and not in reality. Um, it is regarded as perfect of its kind, existing only in the imagination. And then the spiritual ideal is the uh, ideal mindset that we want to hold uh, within our spirit, the motivating force that we have. The ideal is a standard by which one lives. Mr. Casey would often suggest ideals exercise where people create columns on a piece of paper and explain the spiritual, mental, and physical objectives of their life. This can also be considered a standard operating procedure or a spiritual operating procedure. A spiritual ideal is, as mentioned, often talked about in the readings. One of the uh, central themes in the readings and the guidance that Mr. Casey had provided was that individuals create their own. Sometimes people would ask what my ideal is, and Casey would never outright say, this is what your ideal should be. This is your personal mission statement. He said that it was something that people needed to come up with. Uh, a few excerpts from the readings um, explaining the difference between the two is for an idea and an ideal are two different things. An ideal is that may be sought for, while an idea may lead into troubled waters. Another reading, know that an ideal is not as to what others may do for thee, but what ye may do for others. This applies to the spiritual relationship to the creative forces. And another beautiful reading, then your ideal is not what you may acquire by gimme, 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 but what may I do? What may I give in my relationships to others to make that association the beautiful experience for which he longs so always? Again, the spiritual ideal is the reason why we are here and the reason why you would like to be here. For it is individualized, and it should be a personal approach to the way that we wish to live our service to others and to our God. How can identifying an ideal guide our life's journey? Ideals act as our compass, steering us towards a meaningful life, even if we never completely reach them. It's similar to how sailors use the North Star to navigate the seas. Having a defined ideal provides direction and purpose. While we may never fully realize these ideals, they illuminate our path and help us make choices aligned with our core values. It is nice to have moments of chaos and discord be resolved by asking the simple question, what am I here to do? Is it to address some of these conflicts that I have in my mind? Absolutely. But is it to live up to my spiritual potential, to be an ambassador for spirit, to be a channel of blessings? Yeah, and that is what I am empowered to do, not to throw a fit or be upset in the discord, but to make proper steps to resolving whatever conflict or imbalance may be occurring in my life. There's a very popular and cherished author, Herbert Currier, who wrote, "The setting of a spiritual ideal is a first major step towards reorientating the motivational thrust of the soul. An ideal is not a goal. It is a motivational standard by which to evaluate our goals and our reason for pursuing those goals. The goal is what, the ideal is why." And I felt like that summed it up perfectly. It is not about um, creating an ideal that we can live up to or achieve. It's more of a method of receiving the issues that come into our life, how we welcome both positive introductions and maybe not so positive. Ideals significantly impact our decision-making processes and life choices. They act as a motivative force, guiding individuals towards actions that resonate with their values and shaping their spiritual path, personal and professional. Um, these clearly defined boundaries can help us avoid obstacles and hardships. I feel like the more I'm able to hone my own personal ideal, the better the better empowered I am to interact with life in general. Uh, One, by thoughtfully selecting and nurturing these guiding principles, we shape our very essence and purpose. Individual ideals must be developed and formed by that particular individual. Mr. Casey never outright provided an individual ideal to anyone. Again, it's a self-discovery time that you get to spend with yourself, with a pen and some paper, and maybe write out those objectives and those goals that you would like to have. There were two individuals that had been given guidance on their ideal, and it was Mr. 781 and Mr. 440. They were both young men, had multiple life readings. And in those life readings, Mr. Casey had said that they had been reincarnated in different periods of time. Both were in Egypt and the Americas. They received vocational guidance and guidance for their ideals. They stayed in contact with the ARE through the 70s until their death. Mr. 781 had his first reading when he was 7 years old in 1924. He had a total of five, and he and his parents were pretty active in the association. Mr. Casey had said that he had developed spiritually in previous incarnations in Greece, Egypt, and the Americas, and he had the tendency to be self-aggrandizing. The readings provided guidance on his ideal and uh, had given him a general guidance that he would be well suited for law, stage, or screen as a vocation. And he chose not to follow that advice. Uh, in his fifth reading, he was 18 years old, and he was asking for general guidance in his life. And one of the things that Mr. Casey had said to him is first, know self, know its relationships to the creative forces as may manifest through the activities of self in the material world. Know thy ideals as to thy relationships to thy fellow man. I love that um, understanding of what an ideal is. Personal self and its relationships to the creative force. Um, he had a discussion with Hewlin in 1935 for further clarification, and it was there uh, where he lost touch with the association until 1972. And he was asked to fill out the questionnaire. And at this time, he was 54. And he worked at random different odd jobs as a drugstore fountain jerk, soda fountain jerk, a bartender, the Army Medical Corps, monumental stone cutter, and salesman. He felt that Mr. Casey gave him, accurately assessed him, uh, and provided sound advice, but disagreed with some of his earlier suggestions, and didn't necessarily follow a lot of the sound advice that he had given. Overall, at the time of this questionnaire, he seemed pretty dissatisfied with his life. And now, Mr. 440. This person was actually identified in the readings as a man named Mitchell Hastings. Um, and he's an electrical engineer, and uh, he provided a lot of contributions to FM radio and had a very storied career, both with the readings and professionally. He had many readings about life, health, vocation, and direction. He worked on developing a device that allowed him to communicate with disincarnated beings as well. It did not actually work, but he was fascinated with the spiritual world. According to the readings, he had had incarnations in Atlantis, Egypt, and the Americas, and was around for the second destruction of Atlantis. He needed a lot of feedback and was unsure his choices in life goals. Several readings were given in person. He actually had an opportunity to meet Mr. Casey in person and they became fast friends. And shortly after meeting, they went to Arizona together to look for lapis, which is this this beautiful stone right here. Um, and I believe this particular specimen is from the same mine that they had traveled to in Arizona, called the Bixby mine. As a matter of fact, in one of the readings, Mr. Casey suggested that Mitchell go to the Natural History Museum in New York City and spend time with a large specimen of azurite, which is still there. And I went and visited it in November, and it is massive. It's nearly 7,000 pounds and what, 5 feet tall. A beautiful uh, example of azurite. Uh, so here are two readings that were given to Mitchell Hastings. Uh, his first one and his last one. His first reading was uh, a response to a question, and it was, hence to each soul would there be given under such an impelling force, find self, know the standard of self-life, the ideals of the mental and spiritual body, that you may be well grounded in truth, that there may be that which is ever constructive and for the good of many, rather than for the impelling force that would be for the few, or for self-aggrandizing. For in self-aggrandizing may come much as to the rue the abilities of self, meaning that will cause a lot of harm to him in his abilities with other people overall. One of the last responses that Mr. Casey gave to him was a question that he had, which is, if an opportunity, then please give me advice and counsel to enable me to really be of help to my fellow man later. And the answer is this has been given, in that the practical, the mental, and the spiritual concepts must be one. Consequently, in the studying of the fields covered by others that are to be entered by this association, not as an advantage over an individual or group or organization, but that self in its service to its fellow man may give the greater service to those seeking such a means of carrying on their own activity and their relationships to others. I am I deeply resonate with that last little bit of that um, reading. Uh, that uh, you may give the greater service to those seeking such a means of carrying on their own activity and their relationships to others. What that means to me is to be in service and to help alleviate the burdens of another, help others in their own world and in at their own location where they are currently at. Creating ideals. Now, again, we talked a little bit about ideals and what they look like overall, um, but writing them down is part of the process and adjusting them over time. It is important that we make it our own and that we know that we are indeed living to our own highest self. One of the things that has been mentioned with creating ideals is that we all have ideals and we either have them consciously or unconsciously. They are the state of perfection that we're all heading towards, given our trajectory and our path. The goal is to consciously construct where we are going instead of having it being manipulated or influenced by outside things that may not have your best and highest in mind. So, creating ideals, it is important to understand the spiritual, mental, and physical concepts as well. For a spiritual ideal, think about a spiritual person or concept with the highest sense of purpose. Uh, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, disciples, saints, Mr. Casey, Mr. Fred Rogers, Dr. Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, teachers, pastors, friends, mentors, people that have invested in you over the years that may have embodied patience or love really well. And you recognize that and you're like, I want that. I want to have that for me too. I want to share love or make a funny joke at the right time to lighten the mood. We also talk about the mental ideal, the mental attitude to convey our ideal into the world. The fruits of the spirit are always a good source to start, but also kindness, joy, sincerity, steadfast, powerful, humorous, pleasant, uplifting, wise, and silly. Um, it's the mental attitude and emotion that we convey our ideal with. And I have met many people on a spectrum of different, uh, I'd say, attitudes. Some are very stern and serious, but have so much compassion. And others are silly and kind of wild, but still have so much compassion. And both of their methods are the same. They're sharing their love with humanity, but the method that they're doing it is vastly different. And understanding that for our own personal lives can be a big help. And we're not having to pretend that we are serious or pretend that we're silly. We can just be who we are. The physical is the behavior to manifest your spiritual ideals and habits to adjust. I also think about the method of which I want to convey those ideals with. So I want to be brave. I want to have courage. I also want to have excitement and enthusiasm, but know that I need to be um, gentle and calm when necessary. It also goes into a spiritual set of disciplines as well. One of the uh, guidance Mr. Casey, one of the pieces of guidance that Mr. Casey had given was to eat 3 almonds a day, drink lots of water, eat leafy greens. He was a big fan of celery and carrots and watercress. Those are also physical things that we can incorporate into our own personal lives. And I like to think about the people that I admire, the teachers and the mentors that have shaped me into the person that I am today. Some of the harder lessons that I learned became much easier to do with their guidance and their wisdom. I also like to think about the qualities and the strengths that I admire about them. I have a friend who's a talented pastor, and he has such enthusiasm when he talks about the Bible. He's silly and he's really stern, but I appreciate that compassion and that enthusiasm that he brings forth and through what he does. And I get to do that now as an adult. It is nice to also think about what your ideal looks like, but not only what it looks like, what does it smell like, taste like? What are the vibes to it? What are people going to pick up from you entering into the room? Um, what do you want to do better or improve? Are there things about yourself that you're like, I love me so much, but this part I could probably use a little bit of adjustment, or we could probably love this a little bit more. Maybe massage it or uh, place it in another way that might be more beneficial. It's also great to know what brings you a sense of joy and satisfaction, and excitement too, and to think about the things that you dread. For me, I get excited when I get to go somewhere new with a lot of people that I've not met. That excites me. For some people, that thought could be anxiety inducing. The same is true with kids. Some people love kids and youth and teens. And other people are like, give me all the adults that you can. And I understand. But again, knowing those things can help give you a lot of guidance to what you would like to accomplish in your life. Check in with yourself, be your own best friend. I felt like that was a big part of my spiritual development was to befriend the inner self, the inside me. I was more focused on exploring the inside world than the outside world. And now I'm more excited about exploring the outside world. uh, Enjoy time alone, free from distraction, with a gentle focus. It is nice to have alone time, but to also have a determination. Like I'm going to sit here and think about my ideal and what's important to me. And again, understanding the lesson and working on the assignment, a lifelong goal. We will all be in this together. And it is important to be the best that you want to be. And just because you'd failed at something doesn't necessarily mean it's a closed door. It might mean to try harder. I like to consider Mr. Casey, and after this was Mr. Rogers, but Mr. Casey definitely lived his ideal, his spiritual ideal, his mental ideal, and his physical ideal in some respects. He was fascinated by Jesus at a young age and desired to read the Bible cover to cover every year he was alive, which he did by the time he was 13, and then kept that on through his death. He created his own biblically inspired experience and provided help and guidance for thousands of people seeking understanding for spirituality. And he is still inspiring, guiding, and helping people today. I love Mr. Rogers, and, and he is a big inspiration to me as well. He was a Presbyterian minister and was given the children's program as his church. And his pulpit was a TV show, and his congregation were like 3 to 5 years old. He also studied childhood development so that he would become um, better equipped to communicate with children and address their needs as a child. He inspired others to make kindness attractive and a desired quality. He is a big inspiration to me for teaching humanism uh, with such compassion and grace. He still inspires me today, and I have a lot of Mr. Rogers inspired stuff around. But uh, I'm grateful that I have these awesome people that I look up to and admire. That I may never be like a Mr. Rogers, but I'm going to try. So, speaking of which, let's try to be our own best version of who we want to be by writing our ideals. So, this is a great time to think about what it is you want your ideal to be. What is your mission, your personal objective, and what is the method of which you would like for this to be conveyed? So write it out with paper and a pen. I also used this technique where I had um, this endless supply. I imagined that I had this endless supply of money and that all of my needs were taken care of. However, in order to access this money, I needed to choose one thing to do to be in service to others. And it didn't matter what it was, but whatever I chose, I wanted to provide it for other people. And for me, that was cooking and making food. And that is what I get to do today. I am a food service director for the Salvation Army, and I love the opportunities that I get to serve and feed a wide variety of clients in different settings throughout the year. It is wonderful to imagine what your own personal perfect day looks like. Some people may not want to cook for other people. However, you might want to entertain others. You may want to spend time alone reading. You may want to spend time with family or friends. Whatever that day looks like to you, think about it. Also, think about uh, what you want to be doing for this perfect day and what it looks like and feels like and what it smells like and the vibes from it too. You're this is like a self-graded type of assignment, and credit is given from Spirit, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it is a lifetime exchange policy. You get unlimited do-overs and returns. There's no added fees. It's pretty cool. Um, I do feel like it's important to mention that your ideal might change over time. It may look different in given circumstances or environment. It may change organically. To be flexible is also a blessing and can also help the process along. Uh, Writing in a journal about these things can help clarify and internalize ideals, making them tangible and achievable. I love to write when I am either excited or sad or just confused. I feel like the more I'm able to write, the better clarity my brain becomes, the more clear my brain becomes. And I usually am able to hash out some of those feelings, like why I feel the way that I do, instead of it just being a ball of emotion going, bah, because that's not helpful for anyone. Create a vision board that represents personal ideals visually. For me, I have a whole little altar here that has an assortment of different stones and mementos that I've collected over the years that I'm able to gaze at with admiration and appreciation. I also engage in daily affirmations, I feel like that is an important exercise as well. Um, it is it's hard sometimes. Not every day is going to be um, full of sunshine and clear skies. It might be cloudy and rainy. And during those times, it's helpful to hunker down, to remember what we're doing and that it doesn't rain all the time. Integrating ideals into daily life will take time, but line upon line, precept upon precept, we change and we grow. It is important to have some courage and to be brave. Um, Changing anything starts with an ideal. That's also another Casey um, response. It's nice to have grateful determination and prayerful guidance during this time. Um, Writing coherently is important as well. I have had moments of very tough times where it was difficult for me to write coherently. Eventually, I was able to, and it started to become a lot easier to deal with the tragedy and the trauma that I was experiencing at that time. One of the other ways to get um, a nice change in mindset is to volunteer, to be outside of yourself and to share your time, talent, or treasure. Um, you don't have to necessarily tithe, give money, but to give your attention, a kind and thoughtful word, well placed, means a lot to a lot of people. So, to implement regular self-reflection sessions to evaluate alignment with ideals. Uh, it happens where someone might cut us off in traffic or um, be rude to another person. And it causes like some feelings and some thoughts to arise. Um, being able to reflect on why you got that way and what brought you to this conclusion is important as well. Uh, yeah, if that person who does cut me off really makes me agitated, causes me to pause. And I have to think about all the other things in my life that could be causing more of an issue than this person cutting me off. I am typically a very patient, kind, gentle being. But if there is a sense of discord or imbalance in my life, I become easily agitated. And that is helpful for me to go, what else is in my life that's causing me this frustration? Continuous growth and adjustment of ideals. Again, this will take time. Uh, Ideals evolve as we grow, and aligning your spiritual ideal is a lifelong journey, requiring openness to change and recalibrate as necessary. These are examples of ideals from the original study group, the Norfolk Study Group number one. They were responsible for creating the A Search for God books. To think, to speak, to act from the consciousness of my divine self, that I may be like him, that I may do the things he said I could do, and to help those who have not heard his voice. This is my ideal. That's one of the individual's ideals. Another person's ideal was my ideal is spiritual in essence, regardless of where it leads. Christ the guide, Christ the leader, Christ the way. His way are my ways. His ambitions are my ambitions. To be Christ-like is my ideal. We are all the children of God and should act as such. And another ideal, my ideal is to be a perfect channel through which the will of the Father may be done, whether in the physical, the mental, or the spiritual plane, and to return to the Father from whence I came. My hopes and desires are in the one by whom all were created. Again, these are individual ideals, and you can adopt these as your own or adjust it as needed. As we live our ideals, there is a sense of contention that we are content, but seldomly satisfied. There will always be more to do. There is a lot of synchronicity in chance encounters. There's usually a gentle pull or nudge from within to do something or another. It's great to listen to those. Sometimes it's like, maybe look in this corner over here, or don't do whatever it is you think you want to do right now. And I've been pleasantly surprised in both circumstances. And I hope that you will also have those same opportunities and experiences as well. There is an alignment with the spirit, body, and mind, and that also creates a sense of satisfaction and peace. You get to enjoy the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, faithfulness, kindness, goodness, gentleness, peace, patience, and self control. you'll also more than likely have a mystical experience, a unique dream, or a chance encounter. And those are those moments where I feel like God is blessing me, where I get to feel that oneness of the universe with my brothers, with my sisters. Uh, and I become very grateful to just be a part of this experience and this life. So for me, I found Mr. Casey when I was 18 years old, and I loved the Search for God and experiment books. I worked with ideals in many aspects and adjusted them over the years. Consciously co-created an ideal work and life, and I get to live out my dreams. Um, to get here, I had to pray and meditate and reflect and make uh, decisions that ultimately led to this awakening about reading books and about applying the hard lessons that were difficult to understand. I did have a lot of pastors, teachers, and mentors invest in me over the years. And now I get to do the same for other people, other chefs and spiritual seekers. um, I did have a pretty mystical experience that involved the Salvation Army, a couple of pastors and mentors, and a prophecy and some dreams. And yeah, it was what I like to describe as my own biblical experience or an initiation into the spiritual realm, where I became convinced that everything that I was doing was for a purpose. And this faith that I had was replaced by like a knowing that I knew God was going to be here with me. And I hope that you have that same experience as well, that you also feel that oneness of the universe and with God. Uh, my own ideal is allow me to be a channel of blessings to others and treat the needs of others as my own. I always put the needs of others above my own. Sometimes I have to switch that around based on what's happening, but it has led to an incredibly enriching experience. And yeah, I hope that you too someday will have these awesome, crazy experiences where you're like, that blew my mind, and it will make a difference. So, ideal thoughts to ponder. Change begins with an ideal, and an ideal is a matter of choice. Choice is contingent on the will. And this also brings up the will. The will should be our own and should be um, uh, in that self-control realm. I feel like there are times where we lent our will out to other outside influences and events and things, but that's not necessarily needed. I think that it is important to have our own sense of self-control so that we can redirect our anger or our frustration into a more constructive and positive thing. If that was not the case and we got upset, we just let our will kind of take over. And, afterwards we have to say, I'm sorry about something that I had said or whatever the case may be. It does take practice and it may be very repetitive. I like to think about monks who do these same chants and rituals every day that take hours on hours. Um, there is a sense of satisfaction and peace that they also possess as well. Or you can think of it as the guys from like a famous music band. I think about um, the Rolling Stones and how many times they played Rolling Stone songs. It's a lot. And I'm sure I don't know any Rolling Stones songs off the top of my head, but yeah, it's just think about Mick Jagger and how many times he's sung that song. I don't know. Uh, it does take years of work, but it is an investment in your spiritual growth. And you get to receive the promises of God's Spirit. The more that we seek, the closer that He gets to us. And the more that we knock, the more doors that are opened. So, as we conclude here, I want to thank you all so very much for this opportunity to be in service. Um, I do have study groups that occur every Wednesday at uh, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and everyone is welcome. It's a Facebook study group, so it's people from all across the country. And yeah, uh, thank you again so much for this opportunity to be in service, and I hope that you got a lot out of it. If you would like to contact me or if you have any questions, I can be reached on the screen with my contact information. And again, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye bye.